Just like my dad wanted, I brought our maid with us to the event. For a moment, I couldn't believe my ears. Edgar, standing right in front of his father, referred to me as a maid with a smug attitude. Then, my stepfather, who had been staring intently at my face, suddenly burst out laughing. Confused and upset, I asked, "What's going on?" His father, trying to suppress his own laughter, managed to say, "Well, it's just that when you said Edgar's fiancé, I wondered what kind of woman she'd be. And here we have a face of poverty, it makes me want to see her parents." Hearing this, I, Amy, felt tears prickle at the back of my eyes out of sheer frustration and embarrassment. I ran away from the scene, seeking refuge. Luckily, there was a women's restroom for guests in the party room. I hid there as if running for cover and called my dad. After I explained the situation, my dad came to help right away. When he arrived, he introduced himself, saying, "Hello, I'm the maid's father." Upon realizing who my father was, Edgar's father and Edgar themselves started to panic, and eventually, they faced retribution from my dad and another helper who showed up later. My name is Amy, and I work as a salesperson in a department store. At 40, I'm still single, but I am currently seeing someone. His name is Edgar, 5 years my junior, at 35. Edgar is the son of the owner of a music store located within the department store where I work. Dating the boss's son can attract unwanted attention. That's why I've kept my relationship with Edgar a secret at work, to avoid awkward social situations. We mainly communicate through messages, and I always look forward to checking my phone for messages from Edgar during breaks. Today, I checked my phone to find a message from him suggesting we go out on our day off. Our relationship was still fresh, and spending time together felt new and exciting. Edgar's family owning a music store, they had a piano worth $2 million. Edgar has been playing the piano since he was a child. "I want you to see our family's piano, then I'll play something for you," he texted. "That sounds lovely. I'd love to hear you play," I replied. Edgar is genuinely well-mannered and a calm person. I really enjoy spending time with him. Considering our ages, of course, marriage is on the table, so when Edgar messaged me about going on a date, I felt a twinge of excitement mixed with the usual nervous anticipation. However, I had to decline that day because my mom was coming over from home. "I'm sorry, but I have to stay home because my mom is visiting that day," I texted back. Then, 10 minutes later, Edgar replied, "Your mom is coming over? I'd like to meet her if possible." After thinking it over for a bit, since we were considering marriage, I replied, "That might be a good idea. You can come over for dinner." Edgar was delighted, and so was I, though a bit nervous about how the evening would unfold. My mom arrived earlier in the day, and together we prepared dinner, filling the kitchen with the smells of her best recipes. I told her about Edgar, explaining how our relationship had developed and how he had supported me through various ups and downs, including the humiliating incident at the party. As the evening approached, I hoped that introducing Edgar to my mom would be another step forward in our relationship. Hopes for the future and how important it was for us to have my mom's approval. We both understood that family dynamics could be complex, and we were prepared to address any issues that might arise. The morning continued, and when my mom finally returned from her phone call, she seemed more composed, yet there was a certain deliberateness in her demeanor that suggested she was ready to discuss something significant. "Mom, Edgar noticed that you seemed a bit surprised when he mentioned his last name," I started, hoping to ease into the conversation gently. "Is there something we should know?" My mom hesitated for a moment, then sighed deeply, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Yes, there is a bit of history with the name West. It's not directly about Edgar, but it's something from my past." Edgar and I exchanged a quick glance, bracing ourselves. My mom continued, "Many years ago, when I was just starting out as a violinist, I had a partnership with a music promoter, a Mr. West. It didn't end well. He was a difficult man, and our professional relationship soured because of some unethical decisions he made. It affected my career for a while." I saw Edgar's face change as he absorbed the information. "That was my uncle," he said quietly. I heard about his fallout with several musicians. I had no idea one of them was related to you. The atmosphere felt heavy, but there was also a sense of pieces falling into place. I'm sorry to hear that, Edgar. It must be uncomfortable to hear such things about your family, my mom said, her voice softer, reflecting empathy but also the pain of old wounds. It's okay, Edgar replied. I think it's important we know these things. It helps to understand more about each other's backgrounds. We spent the next hour discussing the past incident more openly, exploring how it had impacted both our families. It was a difficult conversation, but necessary. Edgar expressed his regret over his uncle's actions and assured my mom that his values and the way he conducted his business were in stark contrast to those of his uncle. As the day progressed, the initial awkwardness gave way to a more profound understanding and respect among us. It wasn't easy, discussing such personal and painful memories, but it was crucial for building trust and moving forward. While we navigated these revelations, Edgar and I knew that addressing this openly had actually brought us closer. It made me realize how important transparency and honesty were in a relationship, not just between the two of us, but also with our families involved. The rest of the visit was spent planning for a potential future where both families could come together, not just as in-laws, but as supporters and allies in our respective journeys. Despite the rocky start, the day ended with a hopeful outlook, laying down a foundation for what we hoped would be a harmonious future. That this was a critical juncture in our relationship, and I was determined to approach it with as much openness and grace as possible. Saturday arrived, and as I dressed, I chose an outfit that was both elegant and understated, hoping to strike the right balance between formality and accessibility. Edgar picked me up in the morning, and his usual calm demeanor seemed infused with an unusual mix of excitement and nervousness. On the drive to his parents' house, Edgar filled the silence with chatter about his childhood memories associated with the neighborhood we were passing through. That's the park where I learned to ride my bike, he pointed out, a smile breaking through his nervous facade. It was heartwarming to see this side of Edgar, the personal histories that made him who he was. When we arrived, Edgar's parents greeted us at the door. His mother, with a warm smile, extended her hand, while his father, a more reserved figure, gave a polite nod. Welcome, Amy. We've heard so much about you, his mother said, ushering us into their home. The house was spacious and warmly decorated, reflecting a family with deep roots and a sense of tradition. As we sat down in the living room, the conversation began with general pleasantries, but I could sense the undercurrent of curiosity about me and my background. Edgar's father was the first to delve deeper. So, Amy, Edgar tells us you work at the department store where our music store is located. How long have you been there? He inquired, his tone friendly yet measured. I've been there for about 10 years now, I replied. It's a great environment, and over the years, I've grown quite attached to the community around the store. His mother nodded, then added, and music, do you have any interest in it as well? Given Edgar's passion, I imagine it must be a common interest? Yes, I do enjoy music, though I'm more of an enthusiast than a practitioner, I admitted, smiling. I've always admired those who can play an instrument well, like Edgar. The conversation gradually shifted to more personal topics, and I could tell they were evaluating not just my compatibility with Edgar, but also my fit within their family dynamics. Edgar, meanwhile, stayed supportive, often adding details or anecdotes that painted our relationship in a collaborative and respectful light. As lunch was served, Edgar's mother brought out dishes that she had prepared, each introduced with a little story about its origin or why it was significant to their family. The meal was delicious, and the effort to make me feel welcomed was palpable. After lunch, we took a walk in their garden, and Edgar's father asked more direct questions about my future aspirations and how I envisioned my life with Edgar. I answered as honestly as possible, emphasizing our shared values and hopes for the future. Throughout it all, I remained aware of the importance of this meeting, the unspoken concerns about cultural and familial differences that might linger beneath the surface. But by the time we said our goodbyes, I felt a cautious optimism. Edgar's parents had been warm and inviting, and it seemed we had made a positive impression. As Edgar and I drove back, he squeezed my hand gently. You were wonderful, he said, a tone of relief evident in his voice. I smiled, feeling a mix of relief and happiness myself, hopeful about what the future held for us. Say such things, especially in front of his father. My heart was pounding, and I felt a cold sweat forming as I tried to process the situation. The room suddenly seemed overly warm, and the walls too close. Was this some kind of twisted joke or test? I looked around, hoping to find some sign that this was all a misunderstanding, that maybe Edgar was playing a role for some bizarre reason. But his demeanor suggested otherwise. He was too relaxed, too at ease with what he was saying. It was as if he was a different person in the presence of his father. Dad, you know Amy is not really our maid. She's my fiancé, Edgar finally said, his tone light, as if he was trying to brush off the earlier comments as a joke. His father chuckled, of course, I know. Just having a bit of fun. It's good to test the waters, see if she can handle our sense of humor. He gave me a scrutinizing look, his eyes sharp yet not entirely unfriendly. I forced a smile, feeling anything but amused. I appreciate a good joke, I managed to say, though my voice lacked its usual confidence. But maybe next time, a little heads up would be helpful. Edgar looked at me, perhaps finally noticing my discomfort. Sorry, Amy, I should have warned you about our weird sense of humor. Dad and I always push each other's buttons. Didn't mean to drag you into it on your first visit. His apology seemed sincere, but the damage was done. My perception of Edgar had shifted slightly, tainted by the realization that he could be influenced so strongly by his father's presence. It made me wonder about other aspects of his personality that might surface in the future. We spent the rest of the visit touring the mansion, Edgar pointing out family portraits and sharing stories of his childhood. His father spoke of their business and the parties they hosted, obviously proud of the empire he had built. The conversation eventually returned to normal, focusing on more pleasant topics such as the upcoming party and the famous pianist who would be performing. As the day progressed, I tried to put the uncomfortable incident behind me, engaging in the discussions and asking questions about the piano and the musicians they knew. Edgar's father seemed to take a genuine interest in my background in music, and slowly, the earlier tension began to dissipate. Despite the rocky start, by the time we left, I felt a cautious sense of acceptance from Edgar's father. Edgar, for his part, seemed relieved that the visit had ended on a better note than it began. As we drove home, he kept glancing at me, his expression a mix of concern and hope. I really am sorry about earlier, he said as we neared my apartment. I hope it hasn't changed things between us. I looked at him, taking in the familiar features of the man I loved, now shadowed by the complexities of his family dynamics. It's okay, Edgar. It was a shock, but I think it's good that I saw this side of things. It's all part of understanding each other better, right? He nodded, squeezing my hand. Right. Thank you for handling it so well. I promise, no more surprises like that. As Edgar dropped me off, I stepped out of the car with a smile, reassured in some ways, yet more aware than ever of the challenges that lay ahead. Our journey together was just beginning, and I knew it would require patience, understanding, and perhaps a thicker skin than I had anticipated. The entrance and saw my dad walking in, his presence commanding as always. He dressed in his usual sharp style, despite the casual nature of his visit. My dad has always had an aura about him, a mix of charisma and confidence that often leaves an impression. Hello, everyone, Dad said, his voice carrying a warm, easy authority as he entered the room. Edgar's father, who had been so full of smirks and comments earlier, now looked slightly taken aback. Edgar himself seemed unable to hide his surprise, his earlier arrogance replaced by a hint of respect. Dad, this is Edgar and his father, I introduced them, trying to keep my voice steady despite the swirling emotions. Edgar has been my boyfriend, and well, we've been considering our future together. My dad shook hands with Edgar's father, his demeanor polite but firm. Nice to meet you. Amy has told me a lot about you both. Edgar's father, recovering from his initial surprise, managed a polite nod. We've heard quite a bit about you too, sir. It's a pleasure. The room felt charged with a new dynamic, the power seemingly shifted. My dad turned to me, his eyes softening. "Amy, are you okay?" he asked, clearly sensing my earlier distress. I nodded, feeling a sudden relief washing over me. "I'm better now, thanks, Dad." Dad then turned his attention back to Edgar and his father. "I understand there have been some discussions today. I hope we can all speak openly and honestly about whatever concerns there might be. Family is important to all of us, isn't it?" His words were calm but carried an unspoken weight, hinting at the gravity of the situation and the need for respect and understanding among us. Edgar's father cleared his throat, seemingly adjusting his earlier attitude. "Of course, mister," he paused, waiting for my dad to fill in. "Just call me Thomas," my dad said with a smile. And yes, family is indeed very important. As we all sat down again, the atmosphere had undoubtedly changed. Edgar seemed thoughtful, perhaps reconsidering his earlier behavior, and his father was decidedly more reserved. We talked more, this time about our families, our backgrounds, and what each of us valued in life and relationships. My dad shared stories of his travels and work, explaining how his job wasn't just about being away, but about building something meaningful that he hoped to pass on. Edgar and his father listened, and it seemed as though they were seeing me, and by extension, my family, in a new light. The mocking tone was gone, replaced by a more genuine interest and perhaps a bit of respect. As the afternoon progressed, the initial tension eased into a more comfortable conversation. When it was time for my dad to leave, he gave me a reassuring hug and whispered, "You're doing great, honey. Just be true to yourself, and everything will work out." Edgar walked my dad to the door, and when he returned, his demeanor was more reflective. "Amy, I'm sorry about earlier. It seems I have a lot to learn about family and respect." I nodded, appreciating his honesty. "We all do, Edgar. That's part of being together, learning and growing." As Edgar and his father said their goodbyes later that day, there was a sense of mutual understanding that hadn't been there before. The day had started with misunderstandings and tension, but it ended with a hopeful note, signaling a potential new beginning for all of us. But the respect for each other should come first, regardless of one's background or occupation, my dad continued, his voice calm yet firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. "It's about the person, not just their family or what they do." My father-in-law paused, looking from my dad to me, and then back to Edgar. It was clear that the surprise of my dad's identity had thrown him, and he was now reassessing the situation, perhaps realizing his earlier judgments and comments were not only inappropriate but also quite embarrassing given the circumstances. "I apologize," my father-in-law finally said, his voice subdued. "We may have gotten off on the wrong foot here. It's no excuse, but I suppose we let our assumptions get the better of us." Edgar, who had been silent, finally spoke up, his voice a mixture of frustration and reflection. "I'm sorry too, Amy. I didn't mean to make you feel unvalued or misunderstood. It's been a stressful day, and I guess I wasn't at my best." I nodded, acknowledging his apology, but still feeling the sting of the day's events. It was clear that both Edgar and his father were now seeing things in a new light, thanks to my father's presence and his composed handling of the situation. Dad looked around, then smiled slightly. "Now, how about we reset this visit? I'm actually quite interested to learn more about this famous piano of yours, and maybe share some stories about music. After all, isn't that a passion we all share here?" This suggestion seemed to ease the atmosphere further. Edgar's father, perhaps eager to move past the earlier faux pas, led the way to the party room where the piano stood. "Of course, Mr. Jones. Let's turn this evening around." As we followed, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to see the situation defusing, yet I was also aware of how quickly things had turned and how easily they might again if we weren't careful. Edgar stayed close to me, his demeanor changed from earlier. It seemed he was beginning to understand the depth of his actions and the impact of his words. In the party room, my dad approached the grand piano, inspecting it with an expert eye before sitting down at the bench. He played a few notes, the sound filling the room, beautiful and clear. The mood lightened as music, the universal language, smoothed over the remaining tension. Edgar watched, and I could see a new respect in his eyes, not just for my father, but for me as well. "I never knew music could do that," he whispered to me. "It can," I whispered back. "Music tells more than just stories. It heals, it connects, it understands." As the evening progressed, we all talked more openly, sharing stories and experiences. My father-in-law expressed his genuine apologies for his earlier behavior and his appreciation for the music and the moment we were sharing. It was a reminder of how quickly things could change, for better or worse, and the importance of understanding and respect in all relationships, especially those that are meant to last a lifetime. My mom earlier when he suspected things were going awry, ensuring she would be present if needed. Her sudden appearance only added to the already tense atmosphere. My mom walked directly up to Edgar's father, her expression stern and unwavering. "I've been listening to how you've been treating Amy, and I'm appalled. Did you really think treating someone like a servant was a welcoming way to bring someone into your family?" Edgar's father stuttered, trying to compose a reply, but my mom continued, her voice firm and clear. "And you, Edgar, how could you let this happen? You claim to love Amy, yet you stand by as your father makes these disgraceful comments and plans?" Edgar looked from his father to me, his face showing the turmoil within. "Mom, it's not like that. I was trying to." "Trying to what, Edgar?" "Make it easier by not standing up for her," my mom interjected, her disappointment evident. Feeling the weight of everyone's gaze, Edgar finally spoke up, his voice shaky. "No, that's not it. I didn't want this. I love Amy for who she is, not as a maid. I swear, it just got out of hand." My dad, still stern, turned to Edgar's father. "You've heard what your son just said. This isn't just about a misunderstanding. This is about respect and treating people properly. You can't expect to run a household or a business if you treat people this way." Edgar's father, now clearly distressed, looked at his son and then at us. I apologize. This has indeed gone too far. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Edgar, we need to talk." As they stepped aside, my mom put her arm around me, her presence comforting. "Are you okay, honey?" I nodded, but the emotions of the day were overwhelming. "I don't know, Mom. I thought Edgar was different. But today, everything seems so messed up." My dad joined our side, his look one of concern and support. "Amy, no matter what happens, your mom and I are here for you. We won't let anyone treat you like this, engagement or not." The tension in the room had shifted, and it was clear that Edgar and his father were having a serious discussion nearby. After a few minutes, Edgar returned, his demeanor changed, more resolved. "Amy, I'm sorry. Truly. I should have stood up for you. I should have been clear with my intentions from the start. I want to make this right, if you'll give me the chance." I looked at him, the love I had for him battling with the shock and hurt of the day's events. It was a lot to process, and while his apology seemed sincere, the scars from today would not fade quickly. "We'll see, Edgar. We'll see how things go," I said, my voice steady but cautious. "We need to talk more, and I need time to think about all of this." As the evening wound down, my parents prepared to leave, reassuring me once more of their unconditional support. Edgar and his father apologized again, promising changes and a better approach in the future. As we all departed, the echo of the day's confrontations hung in the air, a reminder of the complexities of family, love, and the importance of respect and understanding in every relationship. "Why are you still focusing on the reception? This isn't about a performance or pleasing your guests. It's about Amy's life and her happiness," Dad responded, his voice firm and resolute. My father-in-law seemed flustered, unable to reconcile his priorities at that moment. Edgar stood up, wiping his tears. "I'm sorry, Amy. This isn't what I wanted." Everything just spiraled out of control. His voice was choked, and it was clear he was overwhelmed by the revelations and confrontations. I looked at Edgar, feeling a mix of pity and disappointment. Edgar, this isn't just about today. It's about how we treat each other and what we value. We can't build a life on misunderstandings and misaligned values. My mother, still stern, added, and you, trying to use Roy as a band-aid for your reception troubles, shows where your priorities are. It's not about fixing things, just for appearances. Edgar's father finally spoke up, his tone softer, perhaps realizing the gravity of the situation. I understand. I've been too focused on the wrong things. Edgar, if you truly love Amy, you need to think about what she needs, not what the business or I need. Edgar nodded slowly, his face a canvas of sorrow and realization. You're right, Dad. And Amy, I do love you. I just got caught up in all this mess. My father, having been silent for a moment, then addressed everyone. It's clear there's a lot to think about. Maybe it's best if we all take a step back tonight. Let's give each other some space to think and figure out what we truly want from this. My mom agreed, yes, that's wise. Amy, your father and I will always support your decisions. Whatever you choose, make sure it's what's best for you. As we prepared to leave, Edgar's father approached me, his demeanor changed from the pompous attitude he had earlier displayed. Amy, I'm truly sorry for how things turned out today. I hope we can find a way to make things right, regardless of what happens with the reception. I nodded, appreciating the apology, but still wary of the sincerity. Thank you. I hope so too. As we walked out, Edgar followed us to the car. Amy, please think about us. I know I've made mistakes, but I don't want to lose you. I looked at him, the moonlight casting shadows across his face, highlighting the genuine regret in his eyes. I'll think about it, Edgar. That's all I can promise right now. The car ride home was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. The weight of the day's events hung heavy, a stark reminder of how quickly life could change and how important it is to choose partners who respect and support you, not just in the good times but especially in the challenging moments. As we arrived home, I felt a sense of relief. The comfort of being with my parents, who understood and supported me unconditionally, filled me with gratitude. I knew that whatever decision I made about Edgar, it would be with a clear mind and a firm understanding of what I deserved in a partner. But it was necessary given the circumstances. I believe in being fair and just, even if it means facing legal consequences, my dad said with a calm determination that had always inspired me. As the legal battles dragged on, I found myself caught between feelings of vindication for standing up to Edgar and his father, and exhaustion from the seemingly endless disputes. The courtroom became a familiar setting, a place where our personal grievances unfolded into public spectacle. One morning, before a court session, I sat with my mom in a quiet corner of the courthouse. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting both strength and concern. Amy, no matter how this turns out, remember that you have done the right thing. Standing up for yourself and demanding respect isn't just about today, it's about setting a precedent for how you will allow yourself to be treated in the future. I nodded, taking comfort in her words. I know, Mom. It's just hard sometimes, seeing how far things have gone. Difficult, yes. But necessary. You're showing that you value yourself enough to fight for what you deserve, she continued, squeezing my hand. The court case with Edgar and his father was a tangled mess of accusations and defenses. Edgar's father tried to portray himself as a victim of circumstance, claiming that his business failures and personal lapses in judgment were due to pressures he couldn't control. Edgar, on the other hand, seemed lost, a man torn between defending his father and acknowledging his own mistakes. When it was my turn to testify, I stood before the judge, my voice steady but my heart pounding. Your Honor, this case is not just about financial compensation. It's about recognizing the emotional and personal damages caused by their actions. They tried to use me, to diminish my value to nothing more than a servant or a financial asset. I am here today to assert my worth, not just in monetary terms, but as a human being deserving of respect. The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally as I spoke. When I finished, there was a heavy silence in the room, broken only by the scribbling of the court reporter. Weeks later, the judgment was delivered. The court ruled in our favor, mandating Edgar and his father to pay not only the overdue alimony to my mom's friend but also a compensation to me for the emotional distress and public humiliation I had suffered. Additionally, Edgar's father's attempt to sue my dad was dismissed, with the judge noting the lack of merit in his claims. As we walked out of the courthouse, a sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was about reclaiming my dignity and closing a painful chapter in my life. "We did it," Mom said, her voice filled with pride and relief. "Yes, we did," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but with the support of my family and the strength I had found within myself, I felt ready to face them, knowing that I had already overcome one of the hardest battles of my life. Sitting in the audience, watching my father take the stage, was a profound moment for me. The concert hall, filled with the soft murmur of an expectant crowd, seemed to hush even further as he sat down at the piano. As his fingers began to dance across the keys, the melody filled the room, enveloping us in a world crafted by his talent and passion. It was a beautiful reminder of what had remained constant through all the tumult of recent months: my father's dedication to his art. As he played, I looked over at my mom, who was watching him with a mixture of pride and joy. I realized then how much of their lives they had devoted not just to their music, but to supporting me through my own trials, even when it meant facing off against my former in-laws in court. The strength they showed, the unity they presented, was something that I now understood I had taken for granted. The music flowed through pieces I knew had been favorites of both my parents over the years. Each note seemed to tell a story, reflecting journeys taken and lessons learned. Listening there, I felt a deep connection not just to the music, but to the legacy of my parents, both in their careers and in the values they instilled in me. The applause at the end of the performance was thunderous. My father received a standing ovation, and as he bowed, our eyes met. In that moment, I could see the mutual recognition of all we had endured and overcome together. It was a silent, profound understanding that went beyond words. After the concert, as we gathered to celebrate his birthday, I approached him with a new sense of appreciation. "Dad, your concert was incredible. I'm sorry I haven't come to more of them. But I promise, that's going to change." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the edges. "Thank you, Amy. But you being happy and safe is all that really matters to me. Knowing you're standing strong, that's the best gift you could give me." We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, a stark contrast to the tension and legal battles of the previous months. It felt like a renewal, not just of my relationship with my parents, but of myself. I had come through a fire and emerged stronger, and now I understood that my parents' legacy wasn't just in their music or their success, but in their resilience, their integrity, and their unyielding support for me. Leaving the venue later that evening, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. The night was clear, the stars bright above us. As we walked together, my mom linked her arm through mine, and I felt anchored, secure, and profoundly grateful. My promise to appreciate and honor my parents felt not just like a duty, but a privilege, a way to continue the beautiful melody they had begun in my life.